Every story has a secret. Story time with Nathan. Forgotten Shadow. Chapter 1. The Missing Wife. 300 a.m. A cold wind rattled the window, making the shadows in the dimly lit room appear as if they were moving on their own. Ethan Lee had not slept for 2 nights. His desk was cluttered with crumpled notes and scattered newspaper clippings. One article caught his attention. Young woman still missing. No leads after 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago, 34-year-old Sarah Lee disappeared without a trace from her home. Her husband, Ethan Lee, reported her missing, but investigators found no signs of forced entry. Police are currently treating the case as a potential criminal incident. Sarah's last known activity. The night before she vanished, she had received a phone call. Ethan remembered hearing that call, but who had it been from? Every time he tried to recall the details, his mind went blank. Damn it. He clutched his head. For days now, he had suffered from severe headaches and memory lapses. But worst of all, he felt as if someone was watching him. A shadow lurking outside his window, whispers behind the walls, and Sarah's voice.
Ethan, find me.
Every time he heard it, chills ran down his spine. Where had Sarah gone? But tonight, he had found a clue. Her last cell phone signal had been traced to Blackwood Asylum, an abandoned psychiatric hospital shut down for over 20 years. Would he find Sarah there? Chapter 2. The Shadowed Ruins. The cold night air cut through the silence as Ethan's car wound up the mountain road. Blackwood Asylum stood far from the city, deep within the forested hills, and now he had arrived. The hospital loomed like an ancient ruin, exuding an ominous presence. Its crumbling exterior, twisted iron gates, and peeling. No trespassing signs all seemed less like warnings, and more like barriers designed to keep something inside. Ethan switched on his flashlight and stepped inside. The air was thick with decay. Broken glass and rusted medical equipment littered the floor. Mold crept up the walls, and the stench of rot filled his nose. Then, a noise, a faint shuffle, just beyond the edge of his flashlight beam. Who's there? Silence. Then, a flicker of movement. The beam landed on a figure, a woman. She stared at Ethan before speaking.
You're looking for Sarah, aren't you?
Chapter 3. Mira's Warning. She introduced herself as Mira.
I was a friend of Sarah's.
She said. Mira led Ethan deeper into the asylum. According to her, Sarah had been subjected to an experiment here.
This hospital conducted illegal research on memory suppression.
She explained. Memory suppression? Ethan repeated. Mira pulled out an old, tattered file and handed it to him. It contained a list of test subjects. One name stood out. Sarah Lee. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. This can't be real. Then he noticed something else. Beneath Sarah's name was another. His own Ethan Lee. Chapter 4. A Fabricated Reality. Why is my name here? Ethan asked, his voice shaking. Mira's eyes were cold as she answered.
Because you were here, Ethan?
A pulse of pain shot through his skull. Memories resurfaced, fragmented but undeniable. He was a patient. No, he was not a patient. He was a doctor, Dr. Edward Lee. 20 years ago, he had conducted experiments on memory erasure. But when the experiments failed, he erased his own memories. Sarah never existed. She was a figment of his guilt, a construct created to shield himself from the horror of what he had done. The missing wife he had been desperately searching for was just his mind's way of rewriting reality. Chapter 5. The Prison of Memory. It all made sense now. He had performed countless illegal experiments at Blackwood Asylum. When the trials collapsed into failure, he had attempted to erase his own past. But the asylum had not let him go. Mira's expression shifted, and suddenly, her face changed. She was one of the victims. She smiled.
Now you understand, don't you? You can't leave this place.
And then, Ethan, No, Edward realized the truth. He had already died. 20 years ago, when the experiments failed, he had taken his own life, but his soul had never left the asylum. Trapped in an endless loop, he was doomed to search for a wife who had never existed, chasing a lie, unable to escape his own guilt. Then, the walls trembled. The asylum groaned under an unseen force, and in the mirror, Edward finally saw himself. The face of Dr. Edward Lee stared back, a shadow lost in time forever, doomed to repeat his sins. If you liked the video, please subscribe. I'll be back with more thrilling stories. Stay tuned.